Good afternoon, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. This is Rich again, back for your second video blog of the day for Friday, May 8th, 2015, around 4:33 in the afternoon in Belleville, Massachusetts. Nice and sunny day out. A little bit of a backdoor cool front, and it's in the 60s, but tomorrow and Sunday, 70s, 80s, and maybe 90s. Warm weather. Some news to report. ESPN is not going to renew the contract of Bill Simmons, the sports guy, so he's gone from the worldwide leader of sports soon. Mike Babcock, coach of the Detroit Red Wings, is officially a free agent, so he's going to try to find another coaching job in the NHL. And the Restore in Belleville, Massachusetts, which is run by the Humane Habitats of Lowell, is moving out of their building at 257 Boston Road and moving somewhere in New Hampshire in the near future. That's about it on that. My next video subject is about one of the most famous tag teams of all time in the world of professional wrestling. I'm talking about the Midnight Express. There were several variations of the Midnight Express over the years, but the most famous Midnight Express happened between 1983 and 1990 in Mid-South and World Class Championship Wrestling and Jim Crockett Promotions / NWA WCW. The one that had beautiful Bobby Eaton, Loverboy Dennis Condrey, and Sweet Stan Lane, and they were managed by James E. Cornette. Actually, the Midnight Express started back in 1980 as in several regional territories in the southern United States, and it was actually a threesome. It was Dennis Condrey and Randy Rose and Novell Austin, and they were like a stable of wrestlers that wrestled in several regional territories in the southern United States, winning tag team title after tag team title after tag team title. They had the Freebird rule, but that means all three of them were technically the tag team champions, and either one of them could defend the titles at any time and stuff. And it was a great stable. Around 1983, Rose and Condrey and Austin split up, and Dennis Condrey went to the CWA, and he was part of the first family stable managed by Mouth of South Jimmy Hart, and then part of that stable had Bobby Eaton, and they were part of the first family for about like 6-7 months. Around the fall of 1983, there was a talent exchange between CWA and Bill Watts' Mid-South territory. The talent exchange, including Bobby Eaton, Dennis Condrey, and manager Jim Cornette, to Bill Watts' Mid-South territory, and Bill Watts decided to have Eaton and Condrey and Cornette be together, and they called them the Midnight Express. Dennis Condrey was the lover boy, Bobby Eaton was nicknamed Beautiful, and Jim Cornette was their manager mouthpiece, and this was a match made in heaven. The Midnight Express became an awesome tag team, heel tag team. Interference by Jim Cornette with his tennis racket and stuff. Their famous moves were the rocket launcher, double flapjacks, the Vez Doso, which was a bear hug into a leg drop. The Midnight Express had great moves and stuff, and they instantly became the Mid-South Tag Team Champions when they beat Magnum TA and Mr. Wrestling No. 2. And then they got into a legendary feud with the Rock and Roll Express, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson, and they traded the Mid-South Tag Team titles back and forth for several months in 1984 and stuff like this. This was an awesome feud, a classic feud. One time the Midnight Express shaved the head of Jim Cornette, and Jim Cornette had to wear a mask for a while and stuff like that. But eventually the Midnight Rock and Roll Express feud got old in Mid-South Wrestling, and then the Midnight Express, Beautiful Bobby Eaton, Loverboy Dennis Condrey, and Jim Cornette left Mid-South, and they headed to World Class Championship Wrestling when they feuded with the Fantastics, Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers, and they had a long-running feud over the World Class America's tag team titles. They feuded back and forth several months. Titles was exchanging hands several times and stuff. It was a real hot feud, which had a culmination at the David Von Erich Memorial Parade of Champions, the second one in 1985 and stuff. Like the Midnight Express and Jim Cornette were not going to be main eventing in World Class Championship Wrestling because the Von Erichs would refuse to wrestle anybody who weren't really their friends outside of wrestling, and stuff like that. And the Midnight Express and Jim Cornette decided to look other places to wrestle, and they called up Jim Crockett and saying, we want to come to Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. And Dusty Rhodes, the booker at the time, looked at the Midnight Express, and they decided to sign them up in the summer of 1985. And for the first 6-7 months, the Midnight Express and Jim Cornette were basically working television. They weren't really working house shows in Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, working worldwide and Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling show and the World Championship Wrestling TBS Saturday show. And this is also around the time that the Rock and Roll Express came into Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. They were given the tag team championships immediately, and eventually the Midnight Express Rock and Roll Express feud was revived in Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling / Jim Crockett Promotion / NWA, whatever you're going to call it. And in February 1986, the Midnight Express, Condrey and Eaton beat the Rock and Roll Express for the NWA World Tag Team titles, and this feud continued well into 1986. And this was a very great feud. The bookers thought the Rock and Roll Express were better chasing the Midnight Express than holding the titles and stuff. Eventually, the Rock and Roll Express regained the NWA World titles in August of 1986. Then the Midnight Express went into the feud with the Road Warriors, the Legion of Dome, Hawk and Animal, and Precious Paul Elley. They had an awesome feud, which culminated at Starrcade 1986 in a scaffold match. And legend has it both the Road Warriors were injured. Road Warrior Hawk wrestled with a broken ankle and stuff. This was an awesome match. The Road Warriors won. Afterwards, Hawk and Animal and Paul Elley chased Jim Cornette, and Jim Cornette got scared. He fell down and he blew out both his knees. Luckily, he got caught by Big Bubba Rogers, who was their bodyguard at the time. Big Bubba Rogers is the big boss man, guardian angel, Ray Trailer and stuff. If Big Bubba Rogers didn't catch him, Jim Cornette probably would have had 2 broken legs for a long time. And then the Midnight Express went into a feud with Ronnie Garvin and Barry Windham over the NWA United States Tag Team titles. They had Jim Cornette throw fire at Ronnie Garvin and stuff. And gorgeous Jimmy Garvin, who was a heel at that time, came to rescue his wrestling brother, Ronnie Garvin. They weren't actually brothers in real life. In real life, actually, Ronnie is the stepfather of Jimmy in real life and stuff. And this happened in early 1987, but afterwards Dennis Condrey went AWOL. He did not show up for any of the bookings and stuff. He basically dropped out of the wrestling business for a while, and Bobby Eaton was partnerless, and then the bookers of Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, Jim Crockett Promotions, needed to keep the Midnight Express going. They suggested several names as replacements for Bobby Eaton, including Tim Horner, Brad Armstrong, Dr. Tom Pritchard, but they decided on Stan Lane, who was wrestling in Championship Wrestling from Florida. Part of the Fabulous Ones was Steve Kern. Steve Kern retired from wrestling, and Stan Lane became partners with Bobby Eaton and was nicknamed Sweet Stan Lane. And this version of the Midnight Express, Sweet Stan Lane and Beautiful Bobby Eaton, was the better pair than Condrey and Eaton, in my opinion, and stuff. And then the Midnight Express win the United States Tag Team titles from Barry Windham and Ronnie Garvin, and then they feud with such teams as the Mulkey Brothers and New Breed, which was Sean Royal and Chris Champion. They continued they feud with the Rock and Roll Express, which they had some classic matches. They had a scaffold match in 1987 between the Rock and Roll Express against the Midnight Express, but this was not as great as the other one that happened in 1986 with the Road Warriors. Then the Midnight Express got into a feud with the Fantastics, who came into Jim Crockett Promotions. They exchanged United States Tag Team Champions back and forth. They have some matches where Jim Cornette is thrown into a cage, locked up in a cage, which was pretty good and stuff like that. Well, like the summer of 1988, the Midnight Express and Jim Cornette turned face to feud with the Horsemen, Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson, with J.J. Dillon in their corner, and they had some classic feuds. It was title versus title, NWA United States title against NWA World Tag Team titles, and these were pretty awesome. In September of 1988, Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson gave notice they were leaving the NWA to go to WWE, and they dropped the tag team titles to Bobby Eaton and Sweet Stan Lane. The Midnight Express had a house show in Philadelphia, and Anderson and Blanchard says that was the only team they were going to drop the tag team titles to. They weren't going to drop them to the Road Warriors or any other tag team. They just wanted the Midnight Express, which was Eaton and Lane and stuff. And after they did that, the U.S. tag team titles would vacant because they couldn't hold both titles at one time. And then the Midnight Express became faces, but the tag team title run was short-lived. They lost it about 2 months later to the Road Warriors, who were turned instantly heel by Booker Dusty Rhodes to fill the void of the Horsemen leaving and stuff, but that turned out to be a flop. But then the Midnight Express, Eaton and Lane feud with the original Midnight Express, which was Dennis Condrey and Randy Rhodes, and they had Paulie Dangerously in their corner. The original Midnight Express actually wrestled in late 1987 for AWA. They became AWA World Tag Team Champions for a while, then they wrestled in a couple of smaller territories, but in November of 1988, they went to the NWA, which was beginning to be rebranded as WCW and stuff. On addition of WCW Saturday Night, the original Midnight Express come in and they attack Jim Cornette and Sweet Stan Lane and Beautiful Bobby. All three of them were bloody profusely. Crimson Mask, as Gordon Soley would say. And then they had a long-running feud, the original Midnight Express against the Midnight Express, which was a decent feud and stuff like that. It was going to be a long-term feud, but it didn't pan out because in February of 1989, both Randy Rhodes and Dennis Condrey were fired by WCW for they weren't getting over with the crowd and stuff like that, and the feud had to be halted midstream in at Chi-Town Rumble 1989 when it was the Midnight Express and Jim Cornette beating Randy Rhodes and Jack Victory and Paulie Dangerously and stuff. And afterwards, briefly, the Midnight Express left WCW because they had some contractual problems with there were rumors they were even going to the WWE, the Midnight Express and Jim Cornette, but that was just rumors and stuff. They come back to WCW and they feud with the Samoan SWAT team and the Fabulous Freebirds and other teams. And also this is when Jim Cornette got on the booking committee of WCW, which he didn't really like doing. And then this is in the fall of 1989, Jim Cornette starts advising a tag team called the Dynamic Dudes, who Shane Douglas and Johnny Ace, and it got the Midnight Express, beautiful Bobby Eaton and Sweet Stan Lane jealous and stuff, and they actually signed a match for them in the Clash of Champions, and Jim Cornette got very pissed about that, and says it was going to be in a neutral corner and stuff like that. I heard the original plans for like this match between the Midnight Express and the Dynamic Dudes was going to be like the Dynamic Dudes were going to beat the Midnight Express, and Jim Cornette was going to turn the Dynamic Dudes heel, and Midnight Express would have been continue on as faces, but Jim Cornette rejected that idea, saying that he wanted him to turn on the Dudes with the tennis racket and have the Midnight Express turn heel, which they did, but the fans cheered when like Jim Cornette hit Shane Douglas with the tennis racket after like the match was going, good, and then Jim Cornette threw like a chain that Bobby Eaton was going to use on Shane Douglas and stuff, but then Jim Cornette hits Shane Douglas with the racket, and the fans go wild for the Midnight Express turning heels. They should have turn like the Dynamic Dudes heel, in my opinion, and stuff, and had them with Jim Cornette just to get them over and stuff. But that was one of that never came to be. And then Midnight Express that feud was forgotten about in the Midnight Express feud with the Rock and Roll Express, who returned to WCW. Eventually, the Midnight Express feud with like Brian Pillman and Tom Zink over the U.S. Tag Team titles. The Midnight Express win the U.S. Tag Team titles again, and they were still fighting secondary tag teams and stuff. They were slated to feud with Doom over the WCW World Tag Team titles, but there was another controversy that they wanted to turn Doom face with Teddy Long and feud with the Midnight Express with Jim Cornette with heels, but that was rejected and stuff. Eventually, the Midnight Express dropped the U.S. Tag Team titles to the Steiner brothers, Rick and Scott, in a house show in East Rutherford, New Jersey in August of 1990. And the Midnight Express and Jim Cornette was basically in preliminary matches and stuff like that. They had an awesome tag team match against Tommy Rich and Ricky Morton at Halloween Havoc 1990, and they were slated to feud with the Southern Boys, which was Tracy Smothers and Steve Armstrong, throughout the end of 1990. There were some long-term plans in 1991 that they were going to break up the Midnight Express. They were going to have like Sweet Stan Lane and Jim Cornette turn on Bobby Eaton, and they were going to have a feud. There were rumored plans that Bobby Eaton was going to hire Paulie Dangerously as his manager, and they would feud Cornette and Dangerously feud with each other. I don't know how good Paul E. Dangerously would have been as a face manager then, but like the Cornette and Lane just walked out of WCW after that, ending the Midnight Express run, and it was disappointing after 7 years that it had to come to this and stuff. But WCW was kind of messed up around that time, the booking committee and stuff with Jim Herd and stuff like that. And then Jim Cornette formed Smoky Mountain Wrestling and stuff, and the Midnight Express is quickly forgotten. And for several years, in 1998, the Midnight Express is reformed with a new version with Bart Gunn and Bob Holly. It was called Bombastic Bart and Bodacious Bombastic Bob and Bodacious Bart, and they were part of the short-lived NWA faction in the WWE and stuff. But Bart Gunn and Bob Holly playing them in as Midnight Express was awful and stuff. They briefly was the NWA World Tag Team Champions, but it was so awful, in my opinion, why they had Bob Holly and Bart Gunn play one of the most legendary tag teams of all time. It was awful. It was an inside rib, probably to Jim Cornette, probably to embarrass him and stuff like that. It was awful, in my opinion. It was short-lived. And the Midnight Express, Sweet Stan Lane, beautiful Bobby Eaton, and Loverboy Dennis Condrey reunited at several wrestling conventions and stuff in the 2000s and stuff. And they had some matches against Cactus Jack, Terry, and Dory Funk Jr., and they recruited Bobby the Brain Heenan as their manager to combat Jim Cornette and stuff. The Midnight Express is probably one of the top 10 tag teams of all time. The Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane teaming up as the Midnight Express version was probably the best one, and also the other one with Loverboy Dennis Condrey and beautiful Bobby Eaton was good as well. The original Midnight Express in AWA with Dennis Condrey and Randy Rose were, okay and stuff, but the other one with Bob Holly and Bart Gunn, quickly forgotten, awful in my opinion, stuff like that. And that's about it on the Midnight Express. Third and final video blog coming tonight will be about former NHL goaltender Mike Richter. Have a good day, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Bye now.